If you want to help your students ace their next multiple choice test, then these proven strategies will give your students the confidence and the skills that they need to succeed. Tip number 2 is a game changer, so pay extra attention to that one. Before we dive into tip number 1 though, be sure to click subscribe where you're watching this video for more like this one. All right, so tip number 1, encourage students to read the question carefully and make sure they understand what it's asking. If they're not sure, suggest they try rephrasing the question in their own words. So for example, if the question is something like this, which of the following details would be included in the following action of the story? And let's say that this is a bit tricky for students. You can practice with them how they could rephrase that question in different ways. So it can be helpful to come up with, a brainstorm of ideas at first until students are able to confidently and quickly do this on their own if they come across a difficult question on a test. So some possible ways that students could rephrase that particular question, just so that you have an idea and you can take and use this with your students as an example, something like this. What are some events that would be part of the following action of the story? Or what happens after the main problem in the story is solved? Or what happens after the story's problem gets fixed? Just to give you some examples. Now, once students have a better grasp of what the question is actually asking, they can more confidently choose the best answer choice. Okay, that's tip number 1. Tip number 2, help students look for clues in the question itself. So often, multiple choice questions include certain keywords that tell students exactly what to do to answer the question. So these are known as direction words. Once students better understand these, they are well on their way to acing those multiple choice tests. So I want to break this down for you. I'm going to give you 4 common direction words that students are likely to see on multiple choice tests. And you can take a screenshot of this if you're watching this on our YouTube channel. So analyze, explain, illustrate, compare, contrast, interpret, summarize, demonstrate, indicate, infer, describe, support, define, and convey. So if students don't understand exactly what these words mean, how can you expect them to do well on multiple choice tests, right? That would be like you trying to make homemade bread and reading a part of the instruction that says, activate the yeast, and you have no idea what the heck activate means, right? Do you think your bread will come out right if you don't know that to correctly activate the yeast, you must dissolve it in warm liquid? Of course not, right? You gotta know what that means. It's kind of like that hilarious scene, if you're a Schitt's Creek fan, so funny. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go watch this afterwards. It's where Moira and David attempt to make enchiladas and neither of them know how to fold in the cheese. It's hilarious. And this is the same thing for your students, right? With these types of words. They must be explicitly taught these common direction words. They need to be able to identify them, define them, and understand how they are being used in a multiple choice question. So to help students master these words, it's crucial to consistently review them. You might make a word wall in your classroom or use the words in your class discussions, do a whole group activity where you analyze how these direction words are used in different questions, and even incorporate them into your quizzes throughout the year, just to give you some ideas for how you can utilize that. So if this strategy resonates with you, then you want to make sure to check out the second video in our series all about test prep that's coming out next week. It's called Boost Your Students' Test Scores with One Activity. And that's where I'll go into more detail about a super engaging lesson you can use in your classroom to not only review direction words, but to help students prepare for state testing in a really fun way. Total side note. All right, getting back to tip number 3 for getting your students to ace their multiple choice tests. You want to encourage students to try to mentally answer the question before reading the answer choices. This is super helpful. And then have them read through the answer choices and choose the answer that best matches theirs. Super simple, easy for them to use. Here's another one, tip number 4. Tell students to not spend too much time on one question. If they're stuck on a question and want to come back to it later, have them just take their best guess. They can mark that question, right, with a little note for themselves and come back later if they have time. But we don't want them getting stuck on a question. And then tip number 5 is to encourage students to make an educated guess if necessary. So if they can eliminate some of the answer choices, their chances of guessing correctly are obviously so much higher. So here are a few strategies students can use to eliminate incorrect multiple choice answers. They can look for clues in the question, right? Some multiple choice questions contain clues that can help students eliminate incorrect answers. So for example, if the question uses words like always or never, it may help to automatically eliminate 1 or 2 of those answer choices. Students can also eliminate extreme answer choices, right? If any stand out as extremely unlikely, it can be best to quickly eliminate it and narrow down the other options. Students can also quickly scan through other questions on the test. Sometimes other questions contain little bits of information that can be helpful in answering tricky questions that appear elsewhere on the test. With these strategies in your toolkit, your students will be well equipped to tackle any multiple choice test that comes their way. All right, make sure that you check out video number 2 that's being released next week in our test prep series, where I'll walk you through a very fun activity that will not only review those direction words that I shared earlier, but will also help boost your students' test scores.